Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations and Conversations presented by IE Horizons. I'm Kamaljeet, your host. And if you have been watching these conversations before, you will know that conversations are an attempt to open the field of awareness to motivate women feel the inner potential, acknowledging our self-worth, to honor oneself enough, spreading the seeds of this consciousness as seeds sprouting with confidence. It's the path towards recognizing and identifying with our true self, which is very important. And before I move forward, please do like and subscribe to my channel if you like it. If you like the videos and the experiences of women, they empower you. Please do like and subscribe. Thank you. Today I'm talking to Sobhana Jaya-Madhavan. Sobhana is the Chief Impact Officer for MSM Unify, a company providing a platform for global higher education for all. She leads their global impact initiatives, focusing on strategic planning, innovation, collaboration, and with diversity, equity, and inclusion. With degrees from Calicut University and the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Sobhana has nearly 20 years in the BC public service, senior private sector roles, and recently served as Associate Vice President of External Relations at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia. She is also a respected public speaker and dedicated volunteer holding pro bono roles at #Code and the BC India Business Network. Shobna states, I'm an unapologetic optimist who believes in the power of humans to make this planet a fairer, kinder, and a better place for us and generations to come. In 2015, she was nominated for the BC Medal of Good Citizenship Award. In 2023, she was awarded the Top 25 Canadian Immigrant Award. She continues to volunteer her time for many nonprofits and is passionate about life, working with, and for people, our planet, and peace. Let's learn more from Shobhana herself about her expansive experience and her insights and wisdom. So, hello, Shobhana. Thank you for being here. I'm so grateful. And, congratulations on your new role as the Chief Impact Officer for MSM Unify.
Well, thank you so much, Kamaljeet. So excited to be able to meet you virtually and really looking forward to this conversation with you today.
Yeah, I think MSM Unify, they help students study globally, internationally. And I would like to know more about them as well towards, as we move our conversation forward. But could you share a little bit about your own story and, journey as an immigrant woman and a woman of color who made such an impact on Canadians, I would say that, you know.
Yeah, well, I think like many of us, being on this beautiful part of the world, the unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples that I'm on, you often kind of look back at the journey. In my case, I came to Canada in 1995 and, grew up in India, was born in Malaysia. So, I feel I sort of belong to the world in some ways. And I'm very connected to India, of course. My roots are there, originally from Kerala. So that's where my ancestry is. And but I've always suffered from wanderlust, and from a very young age, always wanted to travel the world, meet people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different faiths, and learn from professionals from around the world. And so I was thrilled to be able to come to Canada in '95, and like a lot of immigrants, could not find a job, could not get an interview. Credentials were not really recognized, even though I had a master's in social work from Tata Institute in Mumbai, and went through the struggles that a lot of immigrants went through those days and still continue to go through in 2024. And so I started with a minimum wage job at Rogers Arena, which used to be called GM Place in Vancouver. Uh, Worked a minimum wage job, earning $7.50 an hour as an usher, and a couple of months later was fortunate to be able to work as a employment counselor at Coast Foundation, which is a non-profit in Vancouver that helps adults with severe mental illness like schizophrenia and other issues. And I got my real career break, I would say, in December of 1995 when the government of British Columbia, through its Ministry for Children and Families, did a major hiring spree, and they hired 300 social workers from around the country, and I was one of the 300. And I was able to get into my profession, and I stayed with the BC government for nearly 20 years. Loved it, was hugely impacted by the experiences I had as a public servant in British Columbia, and stayed with them for about 20 years. And then when I lost my dad, I decided to move back to India for 2 years to support my mother. And during that 2 years, I had an opportunity for the first time to work in the private sector. I worked with a academic publishing company in Chennai as the global head of HR, and that was an amazing experience too. And in 2017, moved back to Canada, got an offer with SFU to be the AVP of External Relations, and I did 7 years, almost 7 years with them until May 31st of this year. And on June the 3rd, I moved to the private sector again and have the pleasure of now being the Chief Impact Officer at MSM Unify, which is an international edtech company, a Canadian company that has a global presence. So that's a long story short.
Yes, it's an amazing story. You have faced it all. I mean, it's not an easy journey. You have, given a concise story, and it's very beautiful. But, the journey is never easy. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I can see, you've been with the government, and it's not easy to be with the government too, because you're balancing so many things, and the role that you have had working with, women, and you have also previously worked with people with mental health, all difficult, all complex roles you have had, and to deal with to give an opinion, to work with them is harsh, not easy. I really
Absolutely.
respect.
I mean, social problems are complex, they're messy, and that's why we call them the wicked social problems, right? Because they just don't seem to go away. I mean, I just finished teaching a course that I developed for Simon Fraser University. It was a micro credential, and it was basically social work 101. And I just finished my last class on Wednesday, and we were just kind of reflecting, the young students and myself, on the persistence of social problems. Generation after generation, you know, goes through poverty, homelessness, domestic violence, mental health stigma, you name it, right? And you would think that as society progresses, with the modernization we have experienced, with the technological revolutions that we have all been witness to, one would think that, in this decade at least, that we would get a bit of a relief from social problems. Instead, what we know is whether it is domestic violence, whether it is mental health issues, whether it's homelessness and poverty, it still has a huge hold on human society. So then the big question is why? Why is it we're able to make such big technological progress? We are able to find cure for diseases. We are able to do all kinds of amazing medical testing, and catch a problem even before it begins. but we're not able to figure out ways in which human beings can coexist peacefully in a global sense, and then in an intimate partner relationship, which is one of the most special relationships human beings can experience. Why do we continue to see such a great deal of disrespect and violence? uh, and why do children still go to school hungry? you know it's so then you start talking about disparities and inequities, and the list is so long.
That is also something that I often think about, and not that we can, I as a person, but these conversations are all about to bring our consciousness to a higher level, to, to literally compel ourselves to think at a higher level and see, where we are and how are we connected to each other, and what can really pull us up, pull us out of our own reservations. This is we block ourselves, we stop ourselves from connecting with other community people, other families. There are various levels. One can talk about diversity in many different ways, culturally, and ethnicities are different. How they think and how they feel and how they perceive other people. It's very individual, but then yet there is something that we need to respect and have respect for that life. So that brings me, like there are so many programs in all the institutions now for many years. I'm noticing, in fact, I also took up a program because of the same reason, because it was my internal quest that I need to find out what can be done about about diversity and inclusion, and then later on equity also became one of the protocols. How do you feel that these protocols work? Are they really working? There are so many programs at level of projects, they're all implemented in almost all institutions. How far they have been successful? I know there's a lot of funding that goes into it. That is, and they, project people apply for grants for these projects. But how far they have been successful?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. And I think it's, one of the questions that in social services, we always ask ourselves, one, what are the outcomes that we aspire for? And then how do we measure whether our policies and laws and our program funding and other things have truly had an impact? And how do we measure impact? With regards to sort of the physical world, or say the STEM professions, it's very easy to measure outcomes and impact because it's more quantitative and tangible in nature, right? So for example, if you give me x amount of money, and you tell me, can you like create a bucket that can hold 100 liters of water, right? It's very easy to test and make sure that the final product is good enough to hold 100 liters of water and it won't fall apart, right? It's very tangible, it's very quantifiable. It's not the same with anything in the social sciences realm. So, for example, let's just say that I'm going through a very difficult situation. I come and see you as a counselor, and I come to you for 6 sessions. After that, I seem to do well. I go get a job and off I go. Now, the big question is, was it the counseling that really made a difference? Or was it the fact that my younger son encouraged me to get up in the morning and go for a run? And because I exercised, and because I was eating better and sleeping better, I overall made an improvement, and I therefore succeeded in finding a job and being okay. So the cause and effect, becomes very unclear, when you're dealing with anything in the social sciences realm. So government, is in a very unique position in the sense that you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah.
So, if you don't give funding, you'll be accused of not caring about the population. If you give funding, you'll be accused of wasting taxpayers' money because you don't know whether or not it's had an impact. So, I like to take concrete examples. So let me just take one concrete example. So, women fleeing violence, around the globe, that's a major issue, continues to be. Though domestic violence affects all genders, in terms of statistics, world over, we know that women are generally the largest population that are considered to be survivors or victims of domestic violence. And when I say domestic violence, I'm not only referring to physical violence or sexual violence, I'm also referring to emotional violence, financial control, and violence. So we're talking about the whole spectrum. Now, if you look at, say, 10 years ago, the number of shelters that were available in Canada or in British Columbia, the accessibility for services in remote and rural areas, the accessibility for housing for, say, women with young children fleeing violence. If you look at just numbers, it was all extremely low compared to what we have today. The
Absolutely.
second thing is with regards to indigenous populations, there wasn't really a lot of culturally safe programs and interventions. They were asked to get into situations that perhaps had programs that were more colonial than indigenous in nature, right? So if you ask me, has finances that the government has put forward through grants or funding, programs, has it made a difference? Having been in the social services sector, for a very long time, 20 years almost in government, and then the remaining, even though I'm generally considered to be a senior administration uh, professional, I have continued to volunteer and work with nonprofits. And I think I can honestly say, Kamalji, that money and that programming dollars has made a tremendous difference. During COVID, for instance, all these institutions that were providing mental health or services for people fleeing violence, the phones were running off the hook. Here in Vancouver, I think I read they had like a 300% increase in the number of calls for people needing help because during COVID, you were trapped within your home. Now, imagine being someone trapped in a violent relationship. That's the worst thing that could have happened to you. Same thing with children. If parents are abusive, imagine now you can't go to school, you can't go to park, you can't go to the gym. You're stuck in a family, in a home with the perpetrators of violence. So during this time, government acknowledged we need to quickly give more funding for certain things: mental health, domestic violence, um, children affected by child abuse and neglect, food security. All of those programs got a good chunk of change, which then helped them to help people virtually and then in dire circumstances intervene and get people out of the way. So, overall, I would say the needle has shifted in a good way. Where we can do better is to actually see whether we can go deeper into the data. You know, who's in trouble, who ends up getting help, and does the help match the unique needs of the person? So, if I am a woman coming from a culture where I may not have too much freedoms to go and on my own seek for assistance, is the programming taking that into account, or am I only allowed to go and benefit from programs that is meant for a more general population? Same thing with special needs children. Okay, so you have a family with two kids, two children suffering from anxiety, but one child is neurodiverse. Say they have, they're diagnosed with autism. Is the treatment for anxiety taking into account the unique needs of the child with autism? Or is it the same programming we have for everybody? So those are the nuances that we've got to tease out, we've got to measure correctly or to the best of our ability, and keep refining the evaluation processes and take feedback from clients. How did we help you? Did it make a difference? What could we have done better? so that the next group of people who come for that service or support, they have a better experience than the previous group.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this. This is very detailed and kind of very important to know. And about how does it work when during hiring, when institutions are hiring, agencies are hiring staff, they definitely get CVs from various communities, newcomers who are actually qualified but do not get a call. This is a common. Where does inclusion happen there?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, right? Because I think that has been one of the pain points for pretty much any newcomer, who has come into Canada, where, they've done something in their land of origin or in another country, but when they reach here, there is always a question about what's your Canadian experience, or how does your education and work experience from another country translate and become relevant for the Canadian workforce. I think, again, when you look back at 10, 20, 30 years in my case, when I first came in 95, you know, I could speak English. I had worked in India and in overseas. My education was reasonably good. I never got a single interview call. I never got one rejection letter. And when my money started to run out, I decided I'm just going to knock off the MSW and BA from my resume, and I'm just going to apply with grade 12 and see what happens. Though I started to volunteer almost immediately, when I got to Canada, because I've always volunteered and it's like oxygen for me, So one of the first things I did was, go to a settlement agency in Coquitlam and ask them, how I could volunteer. And I started to volunteer in a seniors home in Coquitlam in the recreation department. So I felt I was working almost immediately, even though it was a volunteer job. But then my credentials were not really accepted. And I could never understand why someone would not even call me for an interview and check me out and then reject me. So it was out of desperation. I applied for a minimum wage job. I went for the interview, and based on how I was speaking, the interviewer said, I think you're not telling us something here. So I confessed that I actually had a master's degree and I was just very desperate for a job. And they said, well, you're overqualified. And I said, listen, I got to get a job. I'm running out of money and I can't survive this way for too long. So I'll do anything. And they had three jobs: janitors to clean up the washrooms and the spaces, ushers to greet people, let them know where they're supposed to sit, and then the third was security guards. And I told them I'm happy to do all three. And I got a job as an usher. Now, 2024, fast forward, I work with a lot of the settlement agencies like Mosaic, Diversity, Progressive Intercultural Services. I've had the pleasure of participating in the events, going for the events, collaborating with them to co develop events. And what I've heard over and over again is that the situation has changed in the sense that there is now an acknowledgement that this is a problem. All these agencies are getting funding, federal and provincial, and from foundations, sometimes from universities. And they're able to do programming where newcomers can come, get a bit of an orientation to Canada. They can get help with their resumes, with their interview preparation. Because how you interview, say in India or say in Singapore, is not the way you interview in Canada. Each country has its own systems, it has its own cultural, formats and certain expectations around etiquette and just how you present yourself in an interview. So anyway, if tomorrow I move to Brazil or I move to Mexico, I would take help from somebody local to find out what are the norms here. So I think that is not at all a bad thing. These institutions then work with people, support them, and then refer them to agencies or give them the websites to which they can go off and apply. They do a lot of job fairs where people are matched up. So there is a lot happening now compared to before. But there is still a challenge, which is the jobs that newcomers want and the jobs that they get. There
Yes.
is a huge gap and a difference. And there are many reasons for it. And I think one of the things that as newcomers, we either don't know or we don't accept is that the majority of jobs that are available in Canada, for that matter, North America, is not in the high paying jobs. The majority of jobs and the vacancies are in the minimum wage and lower paying jobs. That's where labor is needed, right? So whether it is in the farms, whether it is in coffee shops, whether it is in retail stores, but not so much to be the cashier, but to be the person who cleans up and stocks up. Across Canada, if you look at the job vacancies, the majority of job vacancies are in the minimum wage or in the lower uh, pay scale. So what happens is the demand and supply, right, gets a little bit complicated here in the sense that I come with a medical degree or I come with a teaching degree and a PhD from another country. There might be only 50 jobs, that I could apply to. And when I apply for the 50 jobs, I'm competing with probably 500 people. Among that 500 people, a large number may already be people who are working in Canada for a couple of years, so they have a lot of Canadian experience. They might have also gone to school in Canada, right? So if I apply for an instructor job in a college and I have a master's degree from India and I have, say, 5 years of teaching experience, but there's another person who applies, they have 15 years Canadian teaching experience, they have a PhD, chances are the college might go with the other person, not necessarily because they're discriminating me, but because that person is truly the better candidate, right? Now, another person might hire me because they might feel that my lived experiences and my international experiences and my struggle and my experiences with adversity might make me a better instructor when I teach a course like social work in a classroom. So then we're talking about the hiring manager's ability to think differently, to take some risks, and to think about things in a more global, more inclusive, and more diverse fashion. So it's very layered, Kamaljeet. It's very complicated, right? We
Yes.
tease out, we go very deep into a rabbit hole.
Yes, it is. It is definitely. But you explain it so beautifully and you explain it in layers and steps. So it makes all the more sense. And again, I'm talking about women. You have worked with women. What are your suggestions in these circumstances? And especially when they find themselves at a critical edge, just at the corner. And how should they uplift themselves? It can be, to reset themselves and move forward. It could be due to maybe domestic violence issues, maybe professionally they are facing a setback, and a lot of things happen in a woman's life. Professional life gets impacted because of your domestic life too. So, how
Absolutely.
should they brace themselves up and move forward?
So when we talk about women in general, so let's just focus on, say, newcomers,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Women in Canada, then that's a smaller population we're talking about. They fall into couple of groupings. So one group of women might be women who uh, are having what I say a good life in the sense that they have a decent education, they have employment, their family situation is positive, and they generally don't struggle for money, right? So these women carry along with not much adversity, and then from time to time they might upskill or change a job, and life goes on. And they have support for their childcare. They don't have any major family problems. So that's one group. The second group might be they have all of what I said for the first group: education, work, money, but they are in a very, very toxic familial relationship or an intimate partner relationship. So they have everything, at face value, but day to day life becomes extremely complicated because there might be violence in the relationship, there might be control and a very negative, toxic environment for them when they go home. So going home is not a happy thing. And so it complicates life. They could be a joint family or they could be just a couple with or without children. So the experience of that second group is very different from the experience of the first group, right? Then you have the last group, which, I would say is very young people, women and girls who have come as students, for instance. So they came as international students, some of them with lots of family support, some with almost none. And they're literally, from the time they get off the plane, they are struggling for survival. And this group, the third group, they're very young, they're in their late teens, early 20s, not much life experience. They probably came straight from living with mom and dad or with grandpa, grandma to this wonderful big country and a big city. And they then become quite a target population for all kinds of exploitation, be it by employers, be it by landlords. They end up getting exploited quite a bit because they didn't know what are some of the realities when they come here, or who should they talk to if there's a problem. So the reason I'm saying this is because when we say women, we're not talking about a homogeneous group, right? So in my case, for example, right now, some people might label me as a divorced woman, right? Yes, I'm a divorced woman. But my experiences and my current day realities of how I live my life and how happy I am or how much meaning I find in my job might be very different from another woman who's also divorced and has my level of education and finances, but then is struggling and has not been able to move on. So I think it's really important, for us to flush these details out, because generally speaking, when people say, oh, let's do something for women, let's empower women, let's put some money into women's programs, there is this feeling that somehow all our realities are somehow more similar than different. And that is not the case, right? Because it really depends not just on how many problems I have in my life, but my innate ability to be resilient, right? So, despite having a ton of problems, I might thrive and I might lead a very, very positive and successful life because of my ability to be strong and to be resilient and to take help if I need help, right? So it's really important, I think, for one, for us to have platforms and safe places where women can talk as freely as I'm talking to you without judgment, right? It doesn't matter what I'm going to say. I know that you're going to respectfully listen and you're going to be empathetic. There's not many places for that. So we need to create those spaces. So, one of the initiatives that I'm very involved with is this wonderful initiative called IWI here in Vancouver, and it's called Immigrant Women Initiative. And it was co founded by two amazing women, Prachi and Tina. New immigrants themselves haven't been here for too long, didn't find jobs in their areas of specialization. So they started to do work that was available. But they wanted, like you, to do something for women in our community. And they have this welcoming monthly space where women from all backgrounds, all over the world, who are newcomers, can come there, spend a couple of hours, hear impact speakers, network, get some help, get some resources, share a meal together, and go. So, so if you ask me, what are the three things women could do? First and foremost is that I would say we must like ourselves. If we don't like and respect ourselves, it's very difficult to expect others to do the same. And that's within our control. I have the ability to like myself, love myself, respect myself 365 days, 24/7. And it's important I do that. Number two, we must believe we're never alone. And if we truly want to get better, move forward, we must reach out, become part of groups, networks, ask for help, go see a counselor, go get a mentor, do whatever it takes not to feel alone and be on this journey by ourselves. Third one is that we cannot ever let ourselves get stuck. The world is a complex place, it's ever changing. Look at the way artificial intelligence is shaping, changing, and transforming our society, right? It does not matter what I really think about artificial intelligence, right? Whether I love it or hate it, that's not the point. But I, as a grown up woman, I have a duty to be at least a bit aware about it, learn about it, use it a little bit, and see how it works, and be able to have intelligent conversations about it in different settings. Because my children are going to be using it all the time. The next generation is going to be basically living a life where technology and life are going to be so inseparable. So if I am a woman who wants to actually be successful in life, I've got to constantly participate in learning, in upskilling, and in improving my skill set and my knowledge base, and put that effort to get to a point where I know more today than I did yesterday. And the same applies for health. Individually, it's fundamentally my job to make sure I eat well, sleep well, exercise well. Nobody else can do it for me. So I would say those are the few things I would say to anybody, not to preach, but just as an opinion.
Very important. No, it's very important. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, in fact, sometimes I think that all these things one can incorporate, and yet there are cultural differences that create misunderstandings as well. All this is parallel, it happens parallelly in our lives. And with these misunderstandings, especially I've noticed with young women, and I've also worked with some international students, young women, they are very body conscious. They are very body image consciousness, to correct myself, and this can be a deterrent and can impact their mental health, their mental well-being, because they are not very confident. And like you said, they are totally alone. They lived a very good life, probably with their parents, in the shelter of their parents, and coming to Canada. But there are other women also in Canada who move away from their families, and for whatever be reasons. What are your thoughts on this? How should they, change, transform? I don't have the right word, but what are your thoughts
Yeah.
on this?
Oh, it's a topic that is so near and dear to my heart. Mental health, and well-being, and it's sometimes it's terribly difficult to watch young people, especially struggling, with self-confidence, body image, and mental health and other issues. And it doesn't matter which age group, we are in. At the end of the day, you either feel good about yourself or you don't. you know I really believe that there isn't really a midpoint there. Like fundamentally deep down, either I feel good about myself, right? I like myself, I respect myself, and I accept the way I look and I show up in this world. So that one, to some extent, it is something that starts to evolve at a young age, right? depending on how you were treated and cared for by your own immediate family, your parents, your siblings, your immediate family members. And then as you go through school and college and university, whatever be the case, as you transition to teenage years and adulthood, how your friends and peers and teachers and professors, how they engage with you. I had such an interesting experience teaching the social work course at Simon Fraser University. So I had about 15 students, and four of them were from the engineering program at SFU, so STEM students. So they came to my course because my course was a one credit course. So sometimes students need one credit to finish off, and they'll take these micro credentials. It was such a fascinating experience for me, teaching these engineering students about social work. And the last class was dedicated to self care and vicarious trauma. So, vicarious trauma is trauma that, you're not going through it, the trauma, someone else is, but by witnessing it or being involved in it some way, say as a social worker or a nurse or a firefighter, you then have a reaction and you suffer because you've witnessed this trauma at very close proximity. So vicarious trauma leads to burnout. So we were talking about the importance of understanding vicarious trauma in all helping professions, and then talking about the importance of self-care. So we talked about what is self-care, what is burnout, how important it is to have a strategy for self-care. We had exercises in the class, we had role modeling, we had role plays. The feedback I got from the students, especially the engineering students, was that this class was extremely valuable to them because it was not covered off anywhere else for them, right? And we were able to have some honest conversations, and all these students were very young. So, how we get treated along life's way is a big thing. Now, some people would say, well, if I was abused as a child, or I was treated or bullied as a child, then all my life I'm not going to be okay. Now, research has shown us that's not the case, because we can develop resilience. We can develop skills at a later age that will help us transform those negative experiences into a different meaning. So, a child who, let's say, was physically abused, you know, till they left home at the age of 18, will be scarred, will be traumatized. But with the help of, counseling, with the help of seeing a therapist or having a mentor, this person can begin to understand why adults abuse children. Not to condone it, not to say that's okay, but to be able to move on. And then the gift they give themselves is the realization that I did not get abused because something was wrong with me. I was okay. I got abused because the adults did not know better, right? And this new meaning making gives you the ability to move on and start a new life, have a different way of being in this world. And then one day, when you become a parent, you can choose to make sure that your children are never abused and they are treated with love and kindness and care. And then through that beautiful experience of parenting in a kind fashion, you will heal yourself because children will reciprocate with love and, with all kinds of wonderful gestures. So, I would say to young people is that if we are constantly doubting ourselves and we are constantly comparing ourselves to somebody else, chances are we're never going to be happy, right? So in my case, I'm 56 years old. I choose not to color my hair or, wear a lot of makeup or try to look younger. I don't want to look younger, Kamaljeet.
Yeah.
I don't I don't know why would I want to look younger. I'm quite happy to look my age or older. What is more important for me is to be natural, right? And embrace myself for who I am at 56. And so for me, what is most important is health, to stay healthy. and to do extremely well in my career and to be able to give back, in a good way in my personal and professional life. For me, that is what success is. So I've defined it that way. So for young people, when you talk to a lot of young people who are doing very well, I know a lot of young people are thriving. And when I talk to them, I get to know the reason they're thriving is that they have at least one or two caring adults in their life, either in their own family or in their family circle or in their education circle, or a mentor, somebody who has their back and who they can turn to. You need to have at least one of those people. Number two, these young people who I see doing extremely well, who have confidence, they rarely compare themselves against somebody else. They build their own brand. They decide to look a certain way, talk a certain way, dress a certain way, and they focus on things like health and wellness. So by being healthy, by being well, being loved and having friends and being socially connected, these people show up publicly in a very positive way. They don't doubt themselves. They show up feeling good, and then they experience something that's more positive. So I think for young people it's really important that they have an adult or two in their life that they can have conversations with without being judged. Two, try and get a mentor. That's very, very helpful. Number three, all of us are beautiful in our own way. We look different, talk different, dress different, color our hair different, or choose not to color our hair. Whatever be the case, you decide how do you want to show up in this world, and then embrace the way you show up in this world. So when you see yourself in the mirror, if you feel good, then you're going to feel good when you step out into the world. If you look in the mirror and you hate what you see, and you feel inadequate, and you cannot even love yourself, then when you get out into the world, you are not going to have a pleasant experience, right? So just some thoughts around it. Yeah. I love the fact that both of us don't color our hair.
Some years ago, I'm just sharing something that happened with me. I stopped coloring my hair at my workplace a few years ago, and one of our managers, I really love the manager, but she said, "Why did you stop coloring your hair?" I said, "I just accept myself, I don't see the need," and wasn't taken very well. But
Yeah, no, I get a lot of pressure. I mean, random people, total strangers, will give me hair advice. I remember passing through the Edmonton airport a long time ago with my two sons, and we were just in transit to Vancouver. And we went to this little store at the airport, and kids were picking up something. And this woman kept staring at me and with just curiosity almost, And she then looked at me and she said, you know, you have a very young face, but if you colored your hair, you'd look even younger. And I just burst out laughing, and my sons did not appreciate this uninvited comment. So they were, kind of looking at her. And I just laughed and I just looked at her and I said, well, thank you. But then the problem is, I don't want to look younger, And she was very confused by my reaction. But one of the things, I love to share because it just takes me back down memory lane is my father, uh, you know, uh, always a hero of mine. uh, I lost him many years ago, but when I was young, my first memory of my father was this dark complexioned South Indian man with salt and pepper hair. And it's such a vivid memory and I loved it. And I remember when I was young, I would ask my dad, when will my hair become like yours? And he would just smile at me. you know and I started to gray in my 30s, and it was not an issue at all for me, because I don't judge people by anything other than how they speak, what they speak about, and how they conduct themselves in life. So for me, character is so much more important than anything that is superficial. So it wasn't a big deal for me. And then I found out in my 30s when I was living in Vancouver that the cancer patients that request for wigs, they are always having difficulty finding wigs because the hair that you donate for wigs for cancer patients, it should be hair that has never been colored, permed, or bleached. Now, very few people will say that their hair has never been colored, permed, or bleached. So there is a shortage of that kind of hair. So I started to donate my hair. And so that's like a huge uh, deal for me because every 2 years I grow my hair up to my waist and then I chop off 10 inches, put it in a bag, and I mail it out. And then I think, oh, somewhere somebody is putting a nice salt and pepper wig and it's my hair, and so I think that is just something very special for me. Yeah,
Absolutely. You still have long hair. That's amazing.
yeah. It takes about 18 to 24 months to get to my waist, and then I just go and get it cut, and then I keep it short. Then the journey starts again, and it's kind of a very special thing for me because, unfortunately, because cancer is such a common disease these days. I'm telling you, every 2 years when I've gone to cut my hair and I send it away for a wig, I do it in the memory of somebody who got diagnosed with cancer or died because of cancer. So it then becomes a bit more personal because you knew this person, right? And I lost my dad to cancer. So there's that special, sort of link, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it is a healing and it is a very, very powerful gesture and a reminder to all of us who never think about these things. It doesn't come to your mind. It's not unless and until you are in a position or you encountered a situation where you were made to look at it. Uh,
Absolutely.
yes,
It's like blood donation, like I donate blood, and every time I go, they say, we have such a shortage for blood, right? And we get blood for free. you know, we don't pay for the blood in our body, and the body has a way of rejuvenating. So it's not like if you give blood, anything, bad is going to come to you. Your body figures out a way to get the blood back. But so few people donate blood, right? Or plasma, right? And so it's so interesting how people always ask, what can I do? What can one person do? And I always, half jokingly, just to make them feel comfortable talking to me, I'll say, well, to begin with, you can start donating blood tomorrow. You know, there's always something all of us can do, right? It's not just money. There's so many things we can do to make this world a kinder and better place for all.
yeah, I hope everyone who watches this, I'll do my best to spread your message through this video as well.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you so much. I'm learning about plasma donation, and I found out that the only place you can do it in the lower mainland is in Abbotsford. So you've got to go to Abbotsford because it's a very special machine that takes the blood out, separates the plasma, and then puts the blood back in. That's what I understand the process is. And there's again a big shortage for plasma. And plasma therapy now has become so effective in helping people dealing with all kinds of serious problems. So I've got to do a little bit research and then make time to drive down to Abbotsford and donate plasma, and I'll definitely share with you by email what the experience was like.
Definitely, I would like to know about it, and I will add it. I find the information and add it in the video information as well.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I can send it to you too. I did a post on LinkedIn the other day about both blood and plasma, and I will share it with you. And if you could add that, that would be amazing.
I will do that. I will do that. Where do you gain that kind of inner strength and resolve? And what does spirituality mean to you in this context? I always ask everyone, because this is something that is very, very close to my heart. Uh,
Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, I think people might describe us in whatever ways they understand us or what our bio says, but each of us have a way of describing ourselves. So when people read out my bio at events and then they look at me and they say, "So tell us a little bit about yourself," I always laugh and say, you put everybody to sleep with that bio. Let me now describe myself, and I usually describe myself, as first and foremost a mother, a simple human being who's in awe of life, and someone who lives life very intentionally and with much gratitude. I don't take anything for granted. And, I truly see life as a gift that comes with its share of ups and downs, you know. And I think from a very young age, I mean, I was very fortunate. I had very caring parents. They were wonderful human beings. And I had a family with my siblings, lots of cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents. So I had a very, happy, easy, childhood, I would say. Not that it didn't have its, moments of pain and suffering, but overall, I would say I was blessed with a very, very happy childhood. So I think for me, my foundation, is very strong, right? I've experienced love, I've experienced respect, I experienced freedom. And so, like many people around the world, right, who've had to fight every step of the way from the moment they were born, because of where they were born or the family they were born into or because of war. I've had nothing like that happen. So that is the one big part. The second one is, I think it could be because at a very young age I started to volunteer. So I started to volunteer at the age of 16 when I became the president of the Rotaract Club in my small town in Kerala in South India. And for the first time, I was exposed, to orphan boys under the age of 16, who had really never experienced a family, and all they know is that they were abandoned, you know and so I think it opened up my eyes to how the realities of so many people are different from mine. But then I also realized that I then have the power to make a difference, by learning more about this, acquiring some skills. So that inspired me to go into social work. And thanks to this wonderful auntie, Hema Balakrishnan, she was a widow, became widowed at a very young age, moved back to the small town called Palakkad in Kerala, in South India. And she basically ran the Guild of Service orphanage in this small town and took care of children who were orphaned, boys under the age of 16. And I saw in action what generosity is. What does giving back mean? And the impact you can have. One person, just one person, the impact you can have on so many, you know. And I think that has been a very powerful motivator for me, because from the age of 16 all the way up to 56, so 40 years, I have seen how one individual can make a tremendous difference, and then how a group of individuals can change the world for the better in a big way, And so I have made sure I never forget that I have the power to lead a good life, and to focus on giving back and focus on impact. I may not be able to change the world, I may not solve all the problems of the world, but I, as a person, I can definitely have an impact in my personal and in my professional life. And I choose to do that. And in terms of, how I see the world, like I said, I'm a simple person. You know, I think human beings, we unfortunately don't know what we don't know. And hence we end up being pretty egoistic or arrogant. The moment you realize that you are no more significant, than a mote floating in a sun ray or an ant crawling in your garden, then you feel very humble, and you realize that life is that which exists between an inhale and an exhale. That's it. I could think I'm the most powerful person, but my life, your life, everybody's life is just that which is within an inhale and an exhale. And we have no control or no way of knowing when we take our last breath. So I try to remind myself of that so that I stay humble, You know, I remain a lifelong learner, and I live my life with humility and simplicity, and acknowledge that there is so much in this world, so much on this planet, so much that I know nothing about, right? And accept that there is a higher power or a higher, order, out there. But I focusing on what I can do in real time, in real life, and choose to be kind, respectful to people, and consciously look out for opportunities where I can give, where I can support, where I can empower, and I can amplify someone else's good work like yours, rather than focusing on myself because I am such an insignificant being in the bigger scheme of things.
Yeah, very beautifully said. I mean, it's a huge takeaway for me, big, uh, very nicely explained. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. But before you go, please, can you share a little bit more about your new role? Maybe I'll have another conversation about your new role as well, because it is such a beautiful subject, close to what I do as well. I want to know more.
Absolutely. So this is my week two at MSM. So I started with them on June 3rd. So it's basically an international ed tech company that, to put it very simply, it helps international students and partners and institutions, get sort of a one stop shop support to navigate the exciting world of international education. So, my role is being defined, and it will eventually evolve into something that I can talk a lot more about, perhaps in a couple of weeks. But right now, my job is to make sure that across the MSM group of companies, that I support and work with senior management across the globe in different parts of the world, and basically add value, to the international education ecosystem.
Yeah, and one more thing that I want to ask you, I forgot to ask you, what would you recommend? What are your suggestions for prospective international students for Canada who are preparing to come and, it's a new world for them. Probably they have never traveled out of their own.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So,
when it comes to international students, no matter from any part of the world coming to Canada, or from Canada going to another part of the world, I think it's very important for students to do good research, right? And they got to make sure that they have a relatively clear idea of what their future aspirations are, right? Because depending on what you aspire to be, then you basically narrow down your choices, not just in terms of courses, but also institutions, and then which part of the world that you may want to go to. The second one is resources, right? Some families have a lot of resources, other families don't. And one has to make a very solid assessment on what this is going to cost, and then what one can afford. And these days, thankfully, international, education, it's a wide range. The range is quite big. So depending on people's budget, depending on people's grades, depending on interest, organizations like MSM are able, through a one-stop solution, able to support, counsel, work with students to make sure that a good match happens and they have a successful journey as they pursue their higher education in a foreign country. And the other thing is, to learn from the experiences of others, right? Young people these days are hyper connected through social media and other platforms. And, you might have people in your community, in your country, or in your city that have had international education experiences, and to, basically have conversations with them and to learn from them, right? But one of the important things is to make sure you know that in the world of international education, there are good players and there are what I would say unethical or not so good players. And so it's very important for a student to make sure that they don't end up with um, a business or a consultant that could end up, cheating them and causing a lot of harm and suffering along the way. And in Canada, you and I have heard lots of those really, really bad and sad stories. So, anyone who's interested to, learn a bit more or to see an example of a good one-stop shop and a good system, could just Google and look up MSM, Malaysia, Singapore, Malaysia, MSM Unify, and all the information is in one place.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I will also add that information in the video below. So if any,
Everyone, thank you.
yes, I will do that. And I look forward to learning more from you. You know, I am so humbled, and I also remember the first time years ago I messaged you on LinkedIn, and I was humbled by your response, about how you have come around in your position, because I was also looking at, women of color, how they are struggling and how they are growing for moving forward in their life. It meant a lot to me at that time, and it still does.
No, thank you for that. And you inspire a lot of people, including me, for what you've chosen to do, right? I mean, giving a platform for people to share their stories, and giving people a safe space to talk about their journeys, it doesn't come easy. And I think what you're doing is just incredibly valuable. And whether it's 10 people who get impacted or 1,000 people, that doesn't really matter. The point is that now these stories, are out there. And you also, I think, role model, right? Like, how do you show up in this world, feeling proud and feeling good about yourself, and who you choose to be today. And those of us who have had opportunities to live in the East and West, we have friends from all cultures, we work with people from all cultures, we live in a country that's not our motherland. We've got some unique experiences, skill sets, and stories that I think could be very useful to people who are embarking on new journeys. So I just want to say congratulations to you, and for this amazing platform that you built, Kamaljeet.
Thank you for coming here, Shobna. I'm so grateful, and I'm humbled, encouraged at the same time. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Absolutely. And where do you live? I forgot to ask.
I'm in Delta, BC.
Oh, wonderful. So we're not too far from each other. So let's grab lunch or coffee sometime.
I would love to do that. Thank you. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much. You take care. Have a good day.
You too.